So, James Rolfe, when he's not doing AVGN, he does these videos where he talks about other things, asking certain questions. And the one question that he recently asked in a video, as of yesterday, is, what happened to Saturday morning cartoons? Basically, in the video, he gave his, memories of Saturday morning cartoons, and how nowadays, he's more appreciative of a time that he didn't know he'd be appreciative of, or should have been appreciative of, when it was around. So I thought in response, I'd give my own thoughts on Saturday morning cartoons, and kind of give my own opinion as to why they disappeared, and how we can basically relive them, even today. So let's do that, shall we? So for me, I grew up on Saturday morning cartoons since I was about, a babe. Basically, I grew up on Saturday morning cartoons, even despite the fact that, I was going through a lot of medical problems at the time, in my first few years of existence. I was a watcher of Saturday morning cartoons. I can definitely tell you that even though I had my medical issues and stuff, I would be watching Saturday morning cartoons with my sisters. And, it's like I said, it's been with me since almost the day since the year I was born. In fact, if I could really vividly try to remember to my tiniest childhood, just a few months in, of existence, mindset, even though I didn't know it at the time, I was watching Saturday morning cartoons in the fall of 1979. Yeah. And even before then. I was born on July 25th, 1979, and like I said, my issues may have caused me not to really get into knowledge about Saturday morning cartoons until I was a little older. But I can tell you, since I was an infant, and, just a few months into existence and all that, and even basically 5 months into existence, almost half a year, I probably watched Saturday morning cartoons more so than I can imagine. But like I said, these were the Saturday morning cartoons of the 1979-1980 season, and I just didn't know it. I just didn't know it at the time because, of what I was going through. In fact, my parents always had to constantly keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't, have an issue and stuff throughout. But I think my real appreciation for it is when I got over this in the early 80s, like 1982, 83 or so, because I was still dealing with them up to 81. Thankfully, by the time fall of 81 I think came around, I was pretty much, on the verge of, being in the clear, even though I still dealt with the aftermath of my medical issues. I was pretty much in the clear to where I didn't have to worry about, using certain, or, having certain things attached to me because of issues within the bowels and all that. And that's all I'm going to say on that. I don't want to discuss you guys. But it was around, I would say, late 81, fall 81, late 81, and into 82, being someone that was 2 going on 3 years old, that I really started to watch Saturday morning cartoons more so than I can remember. Now, I can't remember every detail, I could tell you that, or even remember what the lineups were, unless you look them up online, because there are Saturday morning cartoon lineups archived from all the way back then. But I can tell you, sorry about that, a little bit of stuttering, I'm trying to think about what I was going to say, but I can tell you definitely that, when, shows like Turbo Teen came on, or the Snorks, or the Smurfs, came on, I definitely remember those. I definitely remember tuning in to NBC with my sisters and watching those, and just enjoying the heck out of them. Even though I was kind of still young, to really appreciate what I was seeing, I was enjoying them. And like I said, this was like, fall, late 81 into 82. But I think when we got into mid 82, fall, I mean, not mid 82, but, when we got to mid 82, summer 82 into fall 82, I think, like I said, I started to become more appreciative of it than ever before, because I was turning 3 years old, so I had more of a little bit of understanding of, ooh, I'm watching special stuff. I'm watching some special cartoons at this time, on Saturdays. And then, of course, 83 came around, and I, continuously watched them and had an appreciation for them, really just looked forward to it every Saturday, even though between 83, 83, 84, 85, I was homeschooled, mostly between 84 and 85, but, I still looked forward to Saturday mornings. It did not matter to me whatsoever of, whether or not I was being homeschooled or I was impersonating, pantomiming, acting out like a preacher bouncing on my mom's couch or something like that, or, in the living room and everything. I just looked forward to watching cartoons on Saturdays. Yes, we had cartoons on the weekdays, there's no doubt, from He-Man and from He-Man to some other shows at the time that I didn't even know about, to Transformers, which was a huge impact on my life, in G.I. Joe and My Little Pony. Even though I watched those on the weekdays, there was something about Saturday morning cartoons that, really just threw a majesticness towards you. Really threw a majesticness, gave off, I should say, not through, but gave off a majesticness to you growing up at that time, because, here you had a certain block on all three different networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. You had a different array of cartoons that you didn't normally see on the weekdays because they were exclusive. They were exclusive to Saturday mornings. And anytime any one of them decided, okay, we're going to do a multi-part series, and they would end one episode with to be continued next week with the to be continued, as a kid, you couldn't wait. Like, you would watch all your other cartoons throughout Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but you would just waiting. I mean, the patience would get to you at times, but you would just waiting in anticipation to see what that next part was going to be on Saturday mornings for that Pacific series. And that was always the interesting thing about Saturday morning cartoons. Like, if they did a multi-part, story on the weekdays, well, you didn't have to wait a whole week. You just had to wait 24 hours until the next episode came on the next day, and then you'd get your answer. But with Saturday mornings, it was completely different. And like I said, you had a whole barrage of cartoons that was exclusive to Saturday mornings. And I really, really appreciated that time. But I think what really helped it make it even more special was when syndication was getting more into it than ever before. Now, I'm not saying syndication wasn't in to the Saturday morning groove of things at all. The main focus at times was Sunday morning cartoons, but they later on in the 80s, started to get more into Saturday mornings as well. In fact, I remember back, around the late 80s, mid to late 80s, stations here in California, Northern California, like KBHK, which is now KBCW, KTVU, which was eventually going to be Fox and all that, KICU, KOFY, Coffee, over time they started to slowly get into the Saturday morning groove of things as well. I can tell you honestly, one memory I have vividly is, and I've mentioned this before when I talk about Transformers, but KBHK had taken Transformers from the weekdays and put them on weekends. Made them a Saturday morning staple because they were going into reruns. And they decided to do like a 2-hour block of Transformers at times, or an hour block of Transformers, where you would have, 2 episodes back to back of G1. And on occasions, they would actually block out, 9 to 11, because they would either show the Five Faces of Darkness miniseries, which was the premiere for season 3. They would either show More Than Meets the Eye, which was the series premiere period, or Ultimate Weapon. I think that's what it was, Ultimate Weapon. And on occasion, surprisingly, they would also show Transformers the movie. Now, yes, a lot of syndicated stations that carry Transformers would advertise, hey, we're doing Transformers the movie on this day, tune in for it. And a lot of fans would. But this was at a time that KBHK had acquired the syndicated licensing rights from KTVU, because KTVU had Transformers on during the weekdays, and when KBHK took a hold of it, it's like, hey, we're going to put this on, not just on the weekdays, but mostly on the weekends. And, that's what they did. And I can remember vividly, in '89, I believe, I was 10 years old, and my mom had told me that if I did good in school for that week, I could record Transformers the movie that Saturday morning. Because one of the things I always loved to do, and any kid loved to do, as a favorite pastime when it would be, when it comes to like the Sunday newspaper, is read the TV guide to see if any new animation was coming on, or any, new episodes were coming on Saturday mornings, and what, that episode was going to be. And I remember looking at the Daily Review one time, and the TV guide out of that, and the Daily Review was a Hayward paper, but we still got it in Fremont. We still had it in Fremont as well. We had our own paper, but we still had the Daily Review as the main paper. And I remember looking to it one day, and I looked down on Saturday, and I saw Transformers, and I vividly remember this, at 9 o'clock, but then as I looked to 9:30 for, at the KBHK, listing, there was nothing there. So I looked at 10 o'clock, nothing there. I looked at 10:30, nothing there. I looked at 11, there was something coming on at 11, but between 9 and 11, there was nothing else listed outside of the 9 o'clock thing of Transformers. And that's when it hit me, because I pretty much had come to the conclusion at that time that Transformers the movie was going to be shown at that time, because they had done it already before. So I asked my mom, hey, can I record this on Saturday? And my mom basically said, yeah, you do good in school, you do good all week, you can do it. Because I would always try to, because anytime we would go to the video store with just us as family, or we would go with friends, I'd want the movie. I'd want to rent the movie. No matter whether they said no or not, I wanted to rent the movie because I enjoyed it. So when that came on, my mom basically, said, you be good and everything, you get to do it. And I was good. I was good in school. I was good at home. So as an end result, she kept her promise, and I got to record Transformers the movie, the edited down television version, where you didn't have the swear words, but you mostly had everything else intact. But I got to record it off KBHK. And the reason I got to record it is because what made Transformers on Saturday morning so different was the fact that they had the Tommy character along with the stop-motion puppet of Power Master Optimus Prime. And usually, like I said, it would just be a half hour or an hour's worth of cartoons of Transformers, and that was it. But when they did something like that on occasions, enough said. And what made this memorable for me when it comes to Saturday mornings is, at the same time, I had my sisters that loved to watch their Saturday morning cartoons. And my oldest sister was into Beetlejuice. She loved the Beetlejuice cartoon. And we would watch it, every Saturday because, at that time, I had already seen all the Transformers episodes there was. So I was like, fine, I'll watch Beetlejuice with you. It wasn't a big deal. But my mom made the promise that, hey, you're good, you get to do this. And so instead of watching Beetlejuice that day, and I think they did go and watch it in another room, because I think they had another TV in their room or something, or in the kitchen. I can't remember. But they did watch it themselves. They did watch Beetlejuice eventually. But I got to record my movie, which was, a blast to do. Even though I don't have that tape anymore, because it was destroyed, I had that tape up to basically when I moved. When I moved to my own apartment in Lawrence, Kansas, I still had that tape. And that was a long time. That was a recording I did in 1989. 1989. So when I moved to Kansas, not moved to Kansas, but when I moved to Lawrence on my own, I had that tape with me even up to when I left. Well, actually I had to leave the tape behind, but still I had it up to before I left, which was about 2007. So that's almost 20 years of something like that on hand. And that's the other thing about Saturday morning cartoons as well, that James brought up and everybody else brings up, is with the advent of VCRs, you could record Saturday morning cartoons and watch them at any time you wanted. And I did that, when I moved back to Kansas, I did that several times. I recorded Sonic the Hedgehog, Saturday AM, Ninja Turtles, Wildcats, Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa. If it was a show I liked, I dedicated several variety tapes, as I call them, to recording those programs and enjoying them. And, I just wish I would have kept them with me, because I would have loved to have transferred them to DVD. And I did kind of transfer some to DVD, but not as much as I would like. But I did what I could. I did what I could to keep it alive and everything. But yeah, I remember, just, using a VCR that me and my dad, as I mentioned before in several videos, had bought at a pawn shop, and it worked. It worked, for the longest time that we had it. But what happened is that we didn't have it. I'll put it this way: we didn't have it no more than about 5 months, and the recording option, the recording option of the VCR burned out. It stopped functioning. I mean, everything else played right, but the recording option stopped functioning. Because I remember I had recorded mostly all of season 2 up to that point of Sonic Saturday AM, Sonic the Hedgehog. From Sonic Conversion to The Void. So I had recorded all the episodes in between that time frame. And I was getting ready to record Cry of the Wolf. I had gone downstairs, turned it on, watched Cry of the Wolf, recorded it, thinking, okay, I'm going to have this episode. And when I went to go play it back, nothing was there. I was like, what the hell's going on? So, of course I recorded something out of an example just to see what was happening. Same thing, nothing happened. And like I said, apparently the recording option had burnt out. So, the VCR still worked, but there was no recording option, unfortunately. But with that said, though, I still watch Saturday morning cartoons even up until, I graduated from high school. I still watch them. Here's what's crazy. So when I played football, even the next day I got up early, tried to watch cartoons, and enjoy myself. Even when I would play baseball and do track and all that, if I was off on Saturday, I'd watch cartoons. The only exceptions is if we had a track meet that day or a baseball game that day. I wouldn't be watching Saturday morning cartoons. I'd be going to the school to go right off where we had to go right off to for the games or the meet that I was being part of. But overall, though, I have a lot of good memories of Saturday morning cartoons. Like I said, these memories go all the way back to when I was a kid, at a very young age. Because I remember things like the Chuck Norris cartoon, Mr. T. I remember watching Scooby-Doo Mysteries and all that very vividly, very, very well. Pup Named Scooby-Doo, the Flintstone Kids. I mean, I could just ramble on and on and on for hours from my experience. And the best part of it, the best part about it was sharing the experience with my sisters, because it was the one thing we had in common. We'd get up, we'd go to the living room, we'd turn on Saturday morning cartoons, and the story. You know, away we went. You know, if you get what I'm saying. But yeah, we had a great time watching Saturday morning cartoons. But obviously the question anybody would have is what caused the downfall of it? You know, what caused Saturday morning cartoons to get a decline? And that's a good question. I mean, because you would think Saturday morning cartoons would be, you know, more stronger than ever with the addition later on of Fox and Fox Kids and then Kids WB in the late 80s, early to mid 90s, or actually the early to mid 90s. You think it would be stronger than ever, but over time things just started to decline, and they declined in a very, very unfortunate way, I think. So yeah, what could have led to it? Well, let's talk about that, because I think that's kind of interesting in its own right. So, what could have led to the decline of Saturday morning cartoons? Well, a lot of people try to pinpoint exactly when the decline started to show its, you know, its bearings. It started to show its face, if you will. And I think the decline started when NBC itself pulled out of the Saturday morning race, if you will. The last year it ever had Saturday morning cartoons was 1991. And I vividly remember this because they advertised this big list of cartoons that they were going to be showing up until a certain point that day. And the cartoons were, of course, Pro Stars, Wish Kid with Macaulay Culkin, Yo Yogi. They still had Smurfs on there. And I think the other one was Space Cats. And that was it. And neither one of these shows lasted about a season. And that was it. You know, for the Saturday morning cartoons on NBC, because I think what really kind of, you know, caused NBC to go downhill a little bit is when they would transition from that first 2 hours, 3 hours of cartoons to a block they would call TNBC, which was short for Teen NBC, and you would have things like Saved by the Bell, California Dreams, and so on. And no knock on either one of those shows. Those were good shows. Don't get me wrong. But it felt like they wanted to go in that, but it basically felt like they were more focused on going in that direction than, you know, remaining with what brought them to the dance. So, you know, I think that kind of started the beginnings of the not the full on assault, if you will, but to me I think that kind of helped start building the foundation for the decline of Saturday morning cartoons, because after NBC fell, you now had 3 major networks, or 4 major networks, you know, eventually, but at that time only 3, those being, of course, ABC, CBS, and Fox. I mean, when Fox joined the Saturday morning race, if you will, NBC was still kind of going strong, and so you had 4 major networks along with the inclusion of syndication to watch Saturday morning cartoons on. But over time, it just, like I said, NBC, I guess obviously the people in charge at the time saw the writing on the wall and said, yeah, Saturday morning cartoons on our network on Saturday mornings ain't cutting it anymore. Let's move on. Or let's move in a different direction. And they did. And then over time, you started to notice that, you know, every other network that was showing Saturday morning cartoons started to follow suit, you know, eventually. Not fully, but eventually. Like ABC and CBS still kept trucking on and trucking on and trucking on, along with Fox, and then eventually WB. They came around in the mid-90s, I think. You know, I think Kids WB came out around the mid-90s. You know, and, you know, they kept, you know, trucking, like I said, kept trucking along and trucking along and trucking along and trucking along. Let me check here. Yeah, 1995. So, you know, 4 years. You know, 4 years after NBC pulled out of the race, you know, Kids WB came around, and you know, they helped, you know, they helped basically bandage up or fill that, well, I wouldn't say bandage up, but they basically came along to fill in that gap of now giving us, once again, 4 major networks, alongside, Fox and ABC and CBS, because, as I said, when Fox came around, NBC was still a powerhouse somewhat. They were still a powerhouse. I think. Let me see. I'm trying to figure out when they came out here. Yeah, 1990. Yeah, 1990. They were still a powerhouse. They were still, a powerhouse. At that time when basically Fox Kids came around. So you had in 1990 4 major networks to watch Saturday morning cartoons on, including syndication. But when NBC pulled out, as I mentioned, it left a gap. It left a gap that eventually, 4 years later, 3.5 years later, got filled by Kids WB. But it was around the time that Kids WB came around that you started to notice now that CBS was starting to go that same route that NBC did. They started to kind of scale back on Saturday morning cartoons, a lot more than usual, to the point that you only had like maybe 2 hours of Saturday morning cartoons on CBS, and that was it. You would have the Action Zone with Turtles and whatever other show they would have on, mostly Turtles, that is. Garfield and Friends, and that was about it, and some other shows, and that was it. That was it for a while, and then eventually, they pulled out completely after 1997, because they held 1996-97, because they held on. The 2 shows that kept them going was Ninja Turtles and Garfield, and they still had the rights to them up until like the mid to late 90s, and then of course when those finally ended, or those licenses finally fell out, CBS, they pulled out completely themselves around that time. ABC, though, they kept going and going and going, for quite some time. They kept going up until about the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was around the early 2000s that they eventually finally pulled out as well. They tried to keep going, but they eventually pulled out, and that left us only that left us only with Fox Kids and Kids WB and some syndicated networks. But it was also around this time that, as a lot of people brought up, you had cable really kicking into high gear with their own Saturday morning presentations on Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, the sister network, Boomerang, which is now its own streaming service, and so on. And syndication kind of still kept it going for a bit before they kind of pulled out for a while. And yeah, it wouldn't be basically until about a couple of years ago that Saturday mornings just finally came to an end. It just finally came to an end, once and for all. And I think, let me see now, I'm trying to look up the information as I do this. But yeah, it wouldn't be until about, it wouldn't be until about, basically, trying to see here, trying to make sure I get this all right, guys. It wouldn't be until about 2017. Yeah, 2017. It wouldn't be until about 2017 when Saturday mornings would come to an end that the last holdout at that time was Fox Kids, which went through, I think it was Fox Kids, or no, it was Kids WB, which went through a variety of names. It went from Kids WB to the Vortex and all that. And it wouldn't be until, like I said, 2017 that it would all come to an end finally. And like I said, it's all, and one of the factors that added to the decline, like I said, is you had a lot of these cable networks presenting their own Saturday morning products and everything, as time went on. But also you had around that time the advent of streaming services. Netflix, you had, well, yeah, like Netflix was one of the reasons. You had other streaming services coming about, like Prime Video, I think, was just coming into its own, and Hulu and all that, as well. And you also had things like Apple TV, Apple, the Apple Store, Apple, like the Apple Store and Google Play, along, like, again, going back to Amazon and places like Vudu and all that would allow you to actually, if you had the money, purchase these classic cartoons to watch whenever you wanted. Heck, you even had the likes of YouTube to be able to watch them as well, and other places like Daily Motion and VENMO and such, and all these other like third or fourth party or second party streaming outlets or video outlets that allowed you to do it. So yeah, to me, over time, the decline to me really started to go back to what I was saying. The decline really started to show when NBC pulled out in the early 90s. And even though it wasn't much of a showing just yet, over time you knew it was going to grow. But as kids and teens at the time, we didn't see it that way. We just felt like, hey, this is going to go on forever, but it didn't. And unfortunately, like I said, 2017, 18 came around. That was it. That was it. Now, the other question obviously is, can we still relive Saturday morning cartoons? Can we still get that feeling back? I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes. And when people ask, can we still get that feeling back of Saturday morning cartoons? Like I said, the answer is yes. There is no doubt you can get that feeling back, because when you look at places like MeTV, and MyTV, and all these syndicated outlets that are dedicated to classic television, you notice that on Saturday mornings they're trying to bring that back. They're trying to bring that feeling back of Saturday mornings as they used to be. You look at MeTV and you got Popeye, you got Bugs Bunny, you got Tom and Jerry. And yes, you kind of get them on the weekdays, but you only get them for like an hour or so. Here on Saturday mornings, you get them for the classic run of 2-3 hours, like it used to be. And I love the fact that you have, places like MeTV and other syndicated networks that are dedicated to classic television, attempting to, bring the Saturday morning feeling back for families and kids of all ages. I really appreciate, them trying to do that. And it's something that I think people running those networks, those syndicated networks, are realizing, hey, we used to grow up on this. This used to be a special time for us. Why can't the new generation of kids have that special time as well? And I think that's the motivation. I don't think, but I believe that's the motivation, in my opinion, for them going in this direction. I really do. The thing now, the other thing about about that question of, can you bring Saturday morning cartoons back? Can you get that feeling back? Yeah, you can, because as I mentioned before, you have YouTube here, and there are people here on YouTube that dedicate their channels to giving you what they call classic Saturday morning blocks. Now, the catch is the programs they have on there do follow certain Saturday morning blocks of different networks, which they do categorize for them to represent. But they're not always the original recordings. They're like taken from Boomerang, or they're taken from Disney Channel or whatever. But even though you could see it from those networks or those services, what the people are trying to do, are trying to give you that, are trying to help you relive that Saturday morning magic, as you first originally saw it. I mean, they even go as far as to include classic commercials, from that time frame, which I think's a nice added touch. So you have YouTube and people that are doing that themselves to, give you that feeling back. The other way you can get that feeling too is to go back, and if the show is on syndication, not syndication, but if the show is on a service you subscribe to, or if you have the DVD, maybe even potentially the Blu-ray of said show, you could try to categorize it like, okay, let's say you used to watch Mr. T. Okay, Mr. T has a DVD out for his series through Warner Archive, and if you have that, you can actually put that on and say, okay, I remember watching Mr. T at 7, boom. 7 o'clock in the morning, you can dedicate yourself to doing that. From like 7 in the morning, here's Mr. T. Okay, what was the other show? Oh, Chuck Norris. Put the Chuck Norris disc in. Alright, here we go, Chuck Norris. And stuff like that. You could do that. You could do that. You could constantly go in that direction with how you used to recall watching Saturday morning cartoons and stuff. But yeah, in a way, you can try to relive and try to bring back Saturday morning cartoons. You know, like I said, you have places like MeTV that's trying to do it, and I respect them for that. I really do. But in the end, the two questions obviously that I think anybody else has is, you know, what will be the legacy of Saturday morning cartoons? What would be the legacy of Saturday morning cartoons? I think honestly the legacy of Saturday morning cartoons is for a lot of us that grew up in the time when Saturday morning cartoons really started to take off, in what people would consider the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons, that being the 80s and the 90s. I think, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, Saturday morning cartoons was always looked at to a lot of us as a special time because, you know, there were certain cartoons you could only watch on Saturday mornings, and I think that's the legacy it leaves behind. That it was a showcase, a 2 to 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour showcase of Saturday morning cartoons you couldn't watch anywhere else but only on Saturday mornings and on these specific networks. And that's the legacy it has. That it was something that, even though you could watch cartoons Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there was something different about Saturday mornings because these were cartoons that you could only watch at that time and on those networks, and that's what made it more special. And you can, and maybe it's just me, but you could also tell at times that it seemed they put more effort into the animation of the shows than they did, you know, with certain shows on weekdays and Sunday mornings. So to me, that's the legacy that it leaves behind. You know, that, you know, it's always going to be known for and leaves behind. The fact that it was a time where you felt like you were, you know, entering another realm. You were entering an exclusive club, if you will, to where, you know, by entering this exclusive club, you can only see, you know, certain things that, you know, there in that club, you know, that you couldn't see anywhere else. And I think that's the legacy it leaves behind. And, you know, it's always going to be known for, in my opinion. You know, to me, that's just something that's you know, unarguable, in my opinion. That's a legacy it's going to leave behind and be known for. And there's no getting around that. So, last but not least, could Saturday mornings make a comeback? Well, if MeTV is any indication, then yes. But it's going to take a group effort, a very big, I should say, group effort on everybody's behalf to try to make that happen. Because you have all these other outlets now, from Cartoon Network to its streaming, you know, its sister streaming service Boomerang, to Disney Plus, to HBO Max, you know, to Hulu and all them. You know, you have these avenues, these other avenues now for people to watch, you know, classic Saturday morning cartoons. But do I think it's possible for them to do I think it's possible for Saturday morning cartoons to make a comeback as they used to? Absolutely. But like I said, it's going to take a group effort. It's going to take a group effort from those at NBC, those at CBS, those at ABC, Fox, and the CW, or the WBD as it's now known, to make that happen. But I think honestly it can be done. I think it can be done, and it's something that I think a lot of these networks nowadays should really consider tapping back into, because there is value in the Saturday morning cartoon lineups. Even if you dedicate your network to saying, hey, I'm going to give you Saturday morning cartoons on NBC, but they're going to be classic cartoons from when your parents, were kids, like in the 90s or the 80s, if you have to go that route, then so be it. But, still it would be something. And it would bring families together, because you could have parents, maybe grandparents, be like, yeah, this is what I used to watch on Saturday mornings, and and I'm glad to see it back. And now you get the chance to see it yourself. So, yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. And you have a peripheral. You have an unlimited peripheral of shows, kids and family shows, that you could put on Saturday mornings. Like, yeah, you could keep them on your streaming services all you want, but you could put them on Saturday mornings. I mean, one thing that a lot of people liked about My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is, even though you could watch episodes every day, and even watch a more recent episode on demand in case you missed it, the one thing that made My Little Pony Friendship is Magic special to a lot of folks is newer episodes would be on Saturday mornings only. For a lot of people, if you were off that day, that gave you a reason to get up to watch a show, like to watch the newest episode and stuff. So you still kind of had that Saturday morning feel, where the only time you could watch new episodes was on Saturday mornings. But yeah, you have a lot of shows now that can make that happen. I mean, NBC this past Thanksgiving, advertised, help advertise G5. So who's to say if they wanted to get back into the Saturday morning cartoon game, they wouldn't be like, we want My Little Pony, make your mark, and they would get it. So I think it is possible. It's just all depending on who can make a deal with who. I mean, CBS, associates themselves with Paramount Plus. There's a lot of cartoons on CBS that they could bring onto the CBS network on Saturday mornings. Classic and new, and people would watch them. The same with ABC and Disney Plus and stuff. So I think it is possible. It's just dependent on those, out there that, that want to, probably go in that direction to make it happen. So I do think it is possible. However, I just wanted to come on here, guys. I do apologize if I stuttered a little bit. I'm doing this unscripted and such. But I just wanted to come on here and, just give you my thoughts in response to James's video on what happened to Saturday morning cartoons, give you my memories on him, and, just try to give my answers to some questions people have. The legacy of Saturday morning cartoons, and if they could ever make a comeback in a way that they, in the way that they used to be. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. What were your memories of Saturday morning cartoons? Did you grow up on them? What were your favorite lineups on the major networks from ABC, NBC, CBS, and eventually Fox, and eventually Kids WB? Let me know down below in the comment section, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Super Chat, Super Stickers are open during the live chat, and Super Thanks after the premiere. Check me out at my BW Roses Discussions podcast and all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at VENMO for content you can't get anywhere else at BW Roses, and at patreon.com/BW Roses, the $1, $3 tier, and at Venmo at Brian-Warmer-2, and at Cash App at BW Roses 98, and at my Teespring store as well. But guys, let me know what your memories are in Saturday morning cartoons, and everything. What were your lineups? Do you think it can make a comeback? What legacy do you think it, has left behind to this day? And until next time, guys, I am out.